Hello again, friends, and welcome to another episode of Culture Crossroads. I'm Andrew Southwick. Thanks to all of you for being with us on this episode. Of course, that's right, the other guy on the screen right now, that's R.C. Williams of Sherlock Market Research and Watchmen Action. R.C., good to see you. We have a lot to dig into, so let's get started with the rundown here, the rundown with R.C. Williams. And I want to kick off the rundown here with, let me set the scene for you, R.C. Our media, of course, likes us to be distracted with the shiny things. And that's one of the reasons why we do the rundown, the news and notes you need to know in no particular order, because it's usually the stories behind the headlines are the ones that matter. You know, we've got, of course, all the outrage about Joe Biden pardoning his son, Hunter. Did anybody expect that he wasn't going to do that? Anyone? Raise your hand. Okay, I thought not. So why are we clutching our pearls and feigning outrage over another miscarriage of justice? And how could Joe Biden lie to us? Are we being serious? Honestly, I would expect nothing less. I would expect nothing less. We have stories now because the big bad orange man is coming back in office, that liberal women are sterilizing themselves and in protest, which to me, I say, okay, I guess probably a good percentage of those women are the ones who would murder their child in the womb. So maybe that's not a bad thing. I'm not really sure what the point of this stuff is. But all these things are shiny things. They're red herrings. They don't really matter. Because what we're really seeing is a continual government encroachment into the rights of individuals. And we're seeing it all around the Western world, all around the world. We see it in Australia with with now the ban on 16-year-olds, 16 minors, 16 and under, from social media. Well, you might think, well, great, we can keep them safe, but isn't that the parent's job? Isn't that the job what you do in your home? Not to mention, how are you going to enforce that without biometric tracking of every single person using every single device, adults and children? So what do you think the real end game is for this? We already know that parents are being arrested and have been arrested. They've had their children taken from them when they don't go along with the trans agenda, or because the school district or their kids' school wanted to trans their kids. We already see censorship. We know doctors have lost their licenses. We know that medical workers have been fired because they wouldn't take the experimental potion. We have to push back on this. And so with that as a setup, RC, I want to bring you in because that's exactly what you want to talk about. How do we do this? How do we put up our walls of defense at the state level? This is huge because this is the fight that's going to be ongoing, even in a Trump administration. RC.
Yeah, Andrew, great question. And you covering those stories. I'll just cite this quickly on Hunter Biden. People should keep in mind that pardon goes all the way back to 2014, which also happens to be the time that Hunter Biden joined the board of Burisma, which has been the subject of any number of documentaries. Just keeping that in mind, let's get to the root. So the Trump administration has shown that their plan is to cut and slash the federal government as much as they possibly can. So what that means is that a bunch of responsibility is now going to fall to the states and the local municipalities, your counties or your cities. So here's the good news. For all of you in your life at any time who've ever said, man, the federal government, DC doesn't do anything, man, I wish I could make a difference. Congratulations, your day is coming very quickly. But Andrew, in all seriousness, what does that mean? That means that our responsibilities increase significantly. So what you do within your 10-block radius, Juliana talks about this all the time, what you do in your neighborhood is going to have an outsized impact on the ultimate result on how your state governs. So let me explain. If you're doing things right in your family life, so we talked about the 4 levels of government on this show before. There's self-government, family government, church government, and then a very small civil government. If 3 are working right, the 4th one, as a byproduct, should be small and effective and do what it needs to do and stay out of your way. Imagine if you're doing things right in those 4 levels in your 10-block radius. That means that strong believers are now in positions of authority in government and they're making the right decisions. If that is the case, then your state will not turn into a smaller version of Washington, D.C. and be a bloated fiefdom where just a few people are at the trough getting all the money and you're not. But now you're at the chapter in the book, Andrew, where the self part of self-government becomes really important. So let me break down fundamentally how this works. Everybody's either talked about or seen our book, Empowered to Act. Let me give you a realistic walkthrough of what you would get from the book and also in a Watchmen action training as we prepare to start these in the first quarter of 2025. So what you have to understand first is that your opponent does an incredible job of framing a topic and simplifying it to the point where people can personalize it deeply. Thus, they become emotional and they can help others to do the same. You have to understand that clearly in order to gain the high ground here. Now, in this instance, those opponents could very well be the people who are in charge of your local or state government. You're going to have to deal with them. Here's how you do that. And we've used these examples before on the show, but I want to go over them again. Amendments 3 and 4 here in Florida were both significant. I'll start with Amendment 4. That was abortion on the ballot. That failed with 57% of the vote because we had a 60% threshold. We've told people many times, you didn't win anything. All you did was stave off an execution. And if you don't get right real fast, this thing is going to pass. What we've shared with people is we allowed the opposition to frame it as a freedom issue instead of a life issue. Here's how it should have been framed. Did you know that if this happens, parents' rights are out the window? So you have no right to know what's going on with your kid. The second is that any medical safety you have is also thrown out the window. What little there was after COVID. That means that with 50 plus medical professional designations, a tattoo artist could tell your kid who you don't know what they're doing because you don't have a right to is going to get a tattoo and they say, oh yeah, I can give you an abortion too. And the third one was constitutional freedom. So if you put something into the state constitution, it is nearly impossible to get it out. So if you did not like your result a year from now, no takebacks, guess what? You are stuck. The same applied for Amendment 3 in the state, which was to legalize marijuana. It would have turned the state government into the biggest drug dealer, and then a few subsidiary drug dealers would have dispensed you your drugs. Guess what? You still wouldn't have been able to grow it yourself, so say goodbye to your freedom. And constitutionally, if you did not like your result, it's just like Obama said, if you like your doctor, you can keep your doctor. If you no longer like your marijuana law, you can't change it because it is enshrined in the Constitution. Andrew, we have to do a much better job as this responsibility comes back to state and local governments in framing our arguments in a very simple way and then empowering people to connect with them on a deep emotional level so that they can carry the message forward.
Well, it's not unlike what we saw, summer 2020 with the Black Lives Matter. When that came out, that was marketing, and it was really brilliant marketing. Just looking at it objectively, because who's going to argue that life matters other than the pro baby murder crowd? Right. Well, of course, life matters. But then you notice how Black Lives Matter was heralded and celebrated. But if you were to say all lives matter, all of a sudden that's a problem. But it's that kind of simple marketing. Well, of course that life matters. And if I disagree, then I'm saying that life doesn't matter, which is not true. But that's the hype that surrounds a lot of this. Is that kind of what you're getting at?
Yeah, Andrew, a lot of people, and I'm glad you brought up this example. It's a really good one. A lot of people don't like the tactic because they don't like who's doing it. Let me let you in on a little secret. The cannon will fire both ways. You have someone just standing in front of you firing a cannon at you. If you stop them, turn the cannon and fire it, it will fire back at them. But you have to be willing to turn the cannon and actually use it for it to be effective in your favor. Stop personalizing who's doing it and do what we told people to do. And honestly, Andrew, this is how the book Empowered to Act came about. We would teach and speak and people would ask us, they'd say, guys, this is great. So what should we do? And we said, look, what you need to do is read Rules for Radicals from Saul Alinsky, because you're going to see that the same game keeps getting played on you over and over and over again. So absolutely zero people took our advice. Thus, we said we need to write the antidote to Rules for Radicals. And that's where Empowered to Act came from. Take your issue personally, but don't take the tools that you use personally. A gun is a gun. It depends on who uses it and how that makes it effective.
Yeah. Now we've got just a couple of minutes left, about 4 minutes. And I know you got a lot more to cover, so I'm gonna open up the floodgates here and walk us through the rest of these takeaways.
Yeah, Andrew. So, I mean, we talked about Hunter Biden a minute ago, and it is interesting that you get a pardon. And the rumor is that Hunter Biden had put together a book and let Joe Biden know he was going to release it if he didn't get a pardon that was going to implicate everybody. So Joe Biden, in Joe Biden fashion, did what he had to do to save his own bacon. Now, again, it is interesting that the pardon goes back to 2014. If it hadn't, then Hunter Biden would still be on the hook for whatever happened with Burisma and the whole thing with Ukraine and everything like that. People have seen that video. It is interesting to keep in mind, as we're in the process of switching administrations, that the rules for me and not for thee, they're trying to ram as many of those through as they possibly can. And as a quick extension on that, there are people in the Senate who are already starting to lean Democrat, which have an R after their name, when it comes to some of the administration's picks for the cabinet. Now, I am of the mind that everybody should be thoroughly vetted, but some of this talk is indeed strange. And it's almost like the old boss isn't going to go away, even though the new boss comes in.
Well, because the same protocols remain in place. The investigative subcommittee just released a 2-year report on COVID-19, right? And they concluded that we've been lied to this entire time, which we knew from day one. They concluded that COVID likely came from the lab and not from bats or pangolins, which we knew from day one. Which means then, by those conclusions, we know that very high-level people whose names are very famous lied to us and lied to us and lied to us. And through their lies, we were not able to, effectively gauge our individual risk factors and so on and so forth. We know that people were put out of their jobs. They were barred from leaving their homes, et cetera, et cetera. All these crimes against humanity, I would say. But the protocol is, well, now they've done the investigation and they released the report, so we're done here. No one's held accountable. No one's going to go to prison, as I think many people should, over that and many other things. So again, why would we think anything different is going to happen? Why would we think that Biden would use his power to pardon Hunter Biden back so far that to make sure that his tracks are covered as well? I'll give you the last word.
Andrew, you can't, right? But this goes back to the level of accountability, especially if things are going to fall to the states and the municipalities. What are you going to do to ensure that this no longer happens again, now that you're actually going to have a real tangible stake in the outcome? What you choose to do or not do will ultimately determine if we continue to hear this story over and over again.